It is now my great privilege to introduce to you the first presenter who also contributed to the catalog that, as Jana said, is upstairs in the museum store. My name is Philip Malzer. I'm the BYU Museum Head of Education, and I had the great privilege on working on this exhibition, also contributing to the catalog and finding ways to make this exhibition accessible to people of all ages via programming and events. I'm sad and happy today. Sad because Krystyna can't be here in person. Any exhibition dealing with James Tissot would be incomplete without Krystyna Matyjaszkiewicz. I've studied Tissot long enough to know that that name comes first when you research the artist. But I'm happy because she is still with us, though virtually via Zoom, right here on the computer, joining us from Manchester, England. And I can't wait to hear her remarks today. It is my great honor to introduce her to you. Krystyna Matyjaszkiewicz became interested in James Tissot through costume research. As assistant curator at London's Barbican Art Gallery, she organized the James Tissot retrospective exhibition in 1984, the first such exhibition in England since 1955. It toured to the Whitworth Art Gallery in Manchester and the Musée du Petit Palais in Paris, and she wrote and edited the accompanying catalog. While at the Barbican, she also worked on numerous artist retrospectives, such as David Roberts and Gwen John, as well as exhibitions on the Edwardian era, panoramas, London, and the British pre-war landscape. Working freelance while raising a family, she co-organized the James Tissot exhibition for a Japanese tour in 1988 and curated exhibitions of work by various contemporary British artists. As a curator and art educator at the Canterbury Museum and Galleries, she presented Edouard Manet's Execution of Maximilian on loan from London's National Gallery in the context of Thomas Becket's murder in Canterbury Cathedral and images of political killing. Since retirement, she has curated exhibitions for Canterbury to mark the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta and of St. Thomas Becket. She has also been able to devote herself more fully to James Tissot research. Some of her findings appeared in catalogues to the 2017 Tate Gallery exhibition Impressionists in London, French Artists in Exile, 1870 to 1904, and the 2019 through 2020 James Tissot exhibition at the Legion of Honor in San Francisco and the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. Again, I can't overstate how wonderful and how pleased I feel and I am that Krystyna is joining us today. She is the Serena Williams of Tissot scholarship and one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. So please welcome Krystyna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and thanks to the organisers for inviting me today. I'd also like to thank Ashley for asking me to write an essay for the exhibition catalogue, as it gave me the opportunity to focus attention on Tissot's Old Testament illustrations, and I drew on two major archival sources now available. Firstly, Tissot's sketches for his Old Testament project, bound into the unique copy bought by Mrs. Erica Rylance, and now in the John Rylance Library of Manchester University. I've come across a listing when the library catalogue became available on the web, but it wasn't until one of my former museum volunteers sent me photos that I got a measure of their importance. Since then, Philip Medhurst, a theologian and retired teacher, has published online photos he took of the sketches, and they're available on his website with images from de Brunhoff's published volumes. I relied on his photos and the handful my volunteer sent me, and I've not been able to travel to Manchester myself yet to see them. I'm in fact on the coast in England. The second archival source was a group of letters from Tissot to de Brunhoff, acquired from his descendants by the Fondation Custodien in Paris, from which I've transcribed and translated extracts as an appendix in the exhibition catalogue. In my talk today, I'm going to focus on Tissot's sketches and concept, and compare these with de Brunhoff's publication. I'll introduce you first to Maurice de Brunhoff, then look at the publication context for Tissot's Bible projects, before exploring his Old Testament plans, de Brunhoff's publication, and some possible reasons for its failure. Maurice de Brunhoff is on the right in this photo with his wife and Tissot. De Brunhoff was born in the old spa town of Wiesbaden in central Germany. His father was Moritz Salomon, Baron von Haber, who fathered 5 children with Ida de Brunhoff but didn't marry her. In 1882, de Brunhoff graduated as an engineer from the École Centrale des Arts et Manufactures in Paris, the most prestigious higher training establishment in France for engineering and science. He worked as publication director for the Première Illustrée and later founded and edited a similar magazine, Comédia Illustrée. Tissot and Brunhoff met when he was manager at Le Mercier, the specialist lithographic printers who produced the illustrations for Tissot's Life of Christ for the publisher's Magnifice. It was an enormously complex undertaking, with each cover plate needing 4 or more lithographic stones, over 4,000 in all. The combination of colour images on the same page as text was very novel, as was Tissot's concept for his Life of Christ publication. There had been an enormous flowering of illustrated publications in the 19th century, including Bibles. The best known and most widespread of these was Cassell's Illustrated Bible. Issued in England from 1859 in weekly parts costing a penny, it continued to be reissued in both cheap and deluxe editions until 1912. It first appeared in America in 1861, and there are editions in Australia and New Zealand, as well as foreign language editions in France and across Europe. The French edition, known as the New Bible, was published in 1864-65, with biblical stories retold by Theo. The Bibles contain over 900 wood-engraved illustrations, some reused from other publications. Note how the images contextualize and illustrate biblical texts on the same page. So we've got Amos introducing the book of Amos. A more expensive upmarket publication was Gustave Doré's Bible, published by Magnifice, with engraved illustrations alongside complete biblical text in French. Doré's images were in the classical tradition of Christian imagery, with idealized figures and settings. Tissot reached his biblical images as being more historically accurate. His Life of Christ book proposal appealed to the publishers Magnifice because it was in the same biblical stable as their successful Doré, but it was an altogether different concept. Tissot had several unique selling points. His book was an illustrated biography of Jesus Christ, not an illustrated New Testament. His novel images were a reportage of consecutive events, as historically accurate as he could make them, packed with detail and inviting viewers to return time and again. His layout and content were also innovative, combining 2 or 3 images with short quotations from relevant Gospels and explanatory texts that give context or historical information. These were researched and written by Tissot himself. The whole thing was aimed at non-specialist readers, but summarizing a huge amount of scholarship. Note how welcoming and accessible these pages are. The initial French deluxe publication in the top left was followed by the English edition of Samson Lowe in the bottom right, by American editions, and by French Edition Nationale that was less expensive and bought more widely. All used the same Le Mercier printed illustrations. The key factor of uniqueness was its focus on presenting an illustrated life, and it was illustrated lives of Joan of Arc or Napoleon that he considered before he decided to focus on the Old Testament. Tissot's concept is summarized in his title page from his sketchbook. He began the publication of Les Hommes et Femmes de la Bible, that's the men and women of the Bible, where Bible is shorthand for Old Testament. It's not the Bible, but the people of the Bible. Tissot highlights that it's by the author of the Life of Christ in the way new books refer to previous bestsellers, and there's a sketch of the Ten Commandments on tablets of stone, immediately recognizable to Christians as denoting the Old Testament. On subsequent sketchbook pages, Tissot lists the book's contents, the men and women of the Bible, from Adam and Eve and creation, then Noah and his children, through to individual kings and prophets, and finishing with people in the apocryphal books, which come at the end of the Roman Catholic Old Testament. The sequence of people follows the sequence of Old Testament books from Genesis onwards. Since there are references to people like David and Solomon in different books, Tissot planned to draw together elements of stories from across the Old Testament to present groups of events that revolve around individuals. Tissot's book begins, as we saw from his contents list, with Adam and Eve and creation, chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning, or au commencement. Tissot's first image is his illustration of God creating the world, the original of which is in the Morgan Library. It's one of 5 original Tissot illustrations bound into their copy number 1 of de Brunhoff's subscriber's edition, which is probably the copy bought by Pepon Morgan. Tissot's second page has God creating Adam. Genesis has 2 accounts of the creation story. In the first, God makes the animals, then creates Adam in his own image. This is what Tissot initially sketched. In the second account, God makes Adam, then settles him in the Garden of Eden before fashioning wild beasts for his company. It's this second account that Tissot actually illustrated. The basic following page has God creating Eve. Adam lies asleep, and Tissot has emphasized his ribs, one of which God made into Eve, according to the Genesis text. We know that Tissot planned to have the 3 illustrations I've shown you as the first 3 in his publication, because they're the first 3 in the sequence of completed Genesis illustrations that Tissot exhibited in 1901, when they're described as comprising the first volume of 4 planned Tissot's Old Testament illustrations to be published by de Brunhoff. In all 3 images, Tissot personifies God as an elderly bearded man, slightly ethereal and plant-like when setting down Adam, and a bit druid-like with Eve. In his eventual book publication, de Brunhoff swapped Tissot's image of God creating the world for an illustration de Brunhoff credits to Henri de Fontaine, one of the artists he employed to complete Tissot's Old Testament illustrations. There's no equivalent sketch by Tissot, and we know from the 1901 exhibition catalogue that Tissot intended his book to begin with his God creating the world. I think the published creation image was conceived, as well as painted, by Henri de Fontaine at de Brunhoff's request. De Brunhoff appears to have been uncomfortable with Tissot's personifications of God, and omitted or amended almost all of them. Rather than selecting biblical texts that Tissot intended, de Brunhoff used the entire Genesis text, and also entire texts from other Old Testament books. Tissot's work on the text was probably unfinished when he died. De Brunhoff wasn't sufficiently knowledgeable or interested himself to make sense of any notes, and although he could have employed someone to put together short texts along the lines of the life of Christ, he opted not to do this. He also didn't seek advice regarding which Old Testament books to reproduce as text in his original French edition. I'm showing you here the first 5 pages of de Brunhoff's publication and the full-page insert of Eve. There's no creation of Adam. We jump straight from the creation of the world to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Then there's Eve's temptation and Eve tempting Adam. Instead of having several images on a page spread as Tissot envisaged, de Brunhoff has an image on every other page, so there's just 1 image per page spread, and sometimes there's no image at all. When we come to the next page spreads, the relationship of images to text begins to go awry. Adam and Eve becoming conscious of their nakedness is described back in chapter 3, whereas here we're on chapters 5 to 6. Similarly, their admonishment and banishment are back in chapter 3, but the text is already chapters 7 to 9, which contain the story of Noah and the flood. Mismatch of text and images is the most serious failing of de Brunhoff's Old Testament. You can look at the pictures without reading the surrounding text, or you can read the page text without looking at the pictures, but you can't do them in tandem except in a very few places. If the focus is on Tissot's illustrations, the biblical text becomes just general background fill, like French's dummy Laura Mitson text. Many of Tissot's illustrations are reproduced in monochrome, either sepia or bluish grey, rather than full colour. This would have reduced de Brunhoff's printing costs, but is very much to the detriment of the publication and doesn't do justice to Tissot's images. Half of these page spreads should have had Noah and the flood illustrations. Here are Tissot's sketches for the story of Noah and the flood. 2 of these 9 images planned by Tissot had been dropped by the time he exhibited his completed Genesis illustrations in 1901, the 2 crossed down the bottom left. Although these weren't among Tissot's colour illustrations, he may have planned to include them as outline engravings. Grouping Tissot and Noah's sketches together like this gives us a sense of what encountering multi-image page spreads would have been like. readers would get a sense of the story easily from Tissot's visuals. Here's how de Brunhoff placed Tissot's images across multiple page spreads. He said this scattering of images was Tissot's idea, but that's clearly not the case. The text by now is way out of sync with the images. Tissot's illustration of Noah's birth is on a page with God's promise to Adam, and if you glance at the image, you might think this is Abram with a child. De Brunhoff included captions beneath the illustrations with the biblical source, so they're identified and readers can go back to the relevant passage of text. But this doesn't make it a user-friendly publication or the type of learning tool envisaged by Tissot. I've included a page spread from Tissot's Life of Christ as a reminder of his learning tool concept. Had de Brunhoff been more selective in his biblical texts, he would have had less of a spacing problem. Noah's story, for example, is told 3 times in the same Genesis chapter, which de Brunhoff quotes complete instead of just choosing one. Tissot knew the biblical text intimately, and his didactic concept for their illustration is demonstrated well here, with Joseph explaining Pharaoh's dream at the top, and vignettes of the 2 dreams in roundels lower down the page. In de Brunhoff's publication, these images are separated across 2 page spreads. Not only that, but the text is midway through Exodus. We're now far away from Tissot's concept, or from popular types of illustrated Bible, where illustrations complement text. Moreover, the reproductions are not consistently doing justice to Tissot's illustrations. The dreams are reproduced by de Brunhoff in poorly defined monochrome, missing completely the beautiful detail of Tissot's original. The second volume of de Brunhoff's French publication starts off better, with an image from the first book of Judges in the first chapter of Judges. Yay! But images and text rapidly get out of filter. On the first page of Ruth, we have a Samson image from Judges that would have been part of a Samson story in Tissot's projected book. De Brunhoff's mismatch of illustration and text is often jarring, as where bodies thrown at the door of the temple, and with text for Elisha's miracle with the widow's oil. The Book of Daniel is not included at all as text in de Brunhoff's French edition, even though he said it would be in his introduction. Tissot's illustrations of Daniel's story are slotted into Nehemiah, but if you looked for the related biblical text, you wouldn't find it. And Tissot's illustration of Suzanne and the Elders, a story in the Book of Daniel edition that's one of the apocryphal books, pops up in the Book of Esther, so out of context that I missed her when I was writing my essay. She's among several prophets, also out of context in Esther, including Amos. If you sought any explanation for Nehemiah and Esther in the theological notes de Brunhoff included at the back of the volumes, you'd be unlucky, as the notes jump from Kings to Job. Lack of biblical knowledge on de Brunhoff's French theme is very evident in editorial inconsistencies between the contents pages here on the left and lists of illustrations. The first volume's illustrations are listed below the Old Testament books in which they're reproduced. Confusingly, in the second volume, they're listed under the Old Testament books from which the stories they illustrate have been taken, including Psalms, Daniel, and Prophets, for which there's no Old Testament text. The contents ends with Job. But buyers of this French edition may not have really noticed or cared. De Brunhoff's selling point wasn't the Old Testament text, but Tissot's illustrations. The first 60 copies of the French edition, plus the Ryland's unique copy, contain 3 states of the 4-page plates as seen here on the top. The Ryland's volumes have bindings by Edouard Pagnon, specially commissioned by de Brunhoff, and buyers of the first 60 copies could opt to have these bindings or commission others. They have low relief plaques inserted that reproduce the image of Moses printed on the title pages, which was by Henri de Fontaine. The original plate proofs meant that the first 60 copies were generally bound into 4 volumes, and the Ryland's copy with Tissot sketches is bound into 6. People bought these primarily for the art, not for the biblical text. Copy numbers 1 to 20 and Mrs. Ryland's unique copy also contained an original Tissot watercolour and letter, and the Morgan copy number 1 had 5 original watercolours. Copy numbers 21 to 60 contained instead a portrait of Tissot, and numbers 61 to 560 had 2 rather than 3 proofs. The pages were sold unbound with specially designed bindings, and it was up to the buyer to get the binding done. Like de Brunhoff, came to produce English language versions, it appears he had advice from people with better understanding of biblical texts. In de Brunhoff's introduction, the wording has been amended and now says, "It would have been both impractical and unnecessary to print all of the text of the Bible." Tissot's New Testament included a harmony of the Gospels, so these volumes, forming a companion work, would have a harmony of the historic Old Testament. It goes on to say that the text therefore contains all of Genesis, Exodus, some of Leviticus, and so on to Kings, selections from Chronicles, much of Daniel, part of Job, some of the Psalms, and typical extracts from the prophetical writings. The text was taken from the King James Bible. I've juxtaposed here the contents pages of the original French edition on the left with my English language edition on the right, so you can see the differences. In the middle are the context page of the contents page, of the French Bible translation by Le Maistre de Sacy that Tissot and de Brunhoff used, and the King James Bible. Including the minor prophets, Amos and all the others that had been lost in Esther and Job now have their own small contexts. This is a selection of page spreads from the first volume of the English edition. Due to inclusion of the complete Genesis and Exodus texts, there's again the problem of images and text being out of sync. Noah is on pages with text relating to Sodom and Gomorrah, Noah's sacrifice with text of Isaac's marriage, the plague of flies from Exodus is in Numbers. But when we get to Deuteronomy, things improve, and in Joshua, images are in the right Old Testament book, even if lagging behind related text. Most spreads have 2 images, some have only one, but rarely none. There were slightly fewer images overall in the English edition, and some were reduced in size or printed in monochrome rather than colour, and the sequence was changed in places with a few compositions altered. In the top left-hand corner, I've put the French version of God Appearing to Noah beside the English one, so you can see the trim made in the English edition. Incidentally, the French print version is different from Tissot's watercolour that you can see in the exhibition. In the second volume of the English edition, the text and image combination works marginally better, though it's not until Baruch in Jeremiah that there's related text on the same page spread as Tissot's illustration. Images from Judges with Judges, and the story of David from Samuel is in Samuel, though both somewhat behind their related texts. But when we get to Daniel, Tissot's illustrations are in the book of Daniel, though, and the prophets, like Amos, each have extracts of text and a context at last. De Brunhoff had promoted his French edition in England and America, where it was bought by libraries as well as print collectors, but sales were not as good as he'd hoped. He probably thought English language editions would sell better, tapping into the known market for illustrated Bibles, but as we've seen, the books didn't work as well as existing publications like Castle's, and Tissot's illustrations weren't enough of a draw for people who already possessed an illustrated Bible. De Brunhoff reissued Tissot's Life of Christ as a companion New Testament volumes, and marketed a deluxe Old Testament edition with a signed photograph of Tissot. He set up the American Tissot Society to tour Tissot's illustrations in America and to market books and reproductions. The society raised funds through taking out mortgages, but failed on repayments and was declared bankrupt in 1909. Prior to that, Old Testament volumes had been offered at heavily discounted prices, as seen in this 1907 advertisement. De Brunhoff's Old Testament books simply didn't work as illustrated Bibles. However, Tissot's images themselves took on a separate and very successful life. The American Tissot Society had produced colour prints and lantern slides of Tissot's Old Testament illustrations and Life of Christ. The colours and reproduction quality of the redrawn images were a bit primitive, but this was the style for popular printing. Prices ranged from 1 to 25 cents each. Both prints and lantern slides sold very well worldwide, from England and Europe to America and Australia. Lantern slide lectures using Tissot's biblical images continued to be advertised or reported on in British newspapers until the late 1920s, and the cheap prints were used in schools until the 1950s or 60s. Today, with the web, the online presence of Tissot's images is huge, and they have a popularity neither Tissot nor de Brunhoff could have envisaged. And I'll finish my talk there. Thank you.